Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey, hi, Seahawk fans. How you doing? I'm Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers, actually in person. This is crazy. Hey, Keith.
How's it going?
Hey, we're doing good.
Yeah, if it looks a little weird, having Bill on the camera twice, well, you're just gonna have to get used to it. It's one show. But yeah, Bill is here in my studio, recording with me. Couldn't get the mic situation set up to make it look normal. So you're getting this weird kind of split screen with us side by side thing.
Yeah, I'm sharing the mic today with Keith, but I don't mind doing so because I'm here in person. It's great, and we've got a beer that we're sharing. We've got our own Seahawks Playbook logo mugs, drinking out of them. So it's good to be here. So today's show we are doing kind of looking at holes in the roster, question marks. All up and down the roster, what we're concerned about going into training camp and the season, what do we think is solidified, and just kind of approaching the roster with a little bit more of a pessimistic look. Maybe we'll see. Maybe we feel better about this roster than we think we do, or maybe there are questions that we uncover as we kind of go through it. And anyway, it's good to be here. Seems like a good show. I don't have any notes. You don't have any notes. We're winging it.
Well, we're not really winging it. It's not like we have it prepped for every show. We don't know this roster inside and out. So
that's true.
So looking at it from a traditionally Keith point of view, with the roster, because I'm the cynical one of the pair of us. He's the optimistic one, but we're going to try and we're looking for holes. We're looking for questions that need answered, that maybe need to be answered outside the organization still before the season starts.
Yeah. And so I thought what we'd just do is go through all the positions and position groups and talk about players, question marks, and what we feel good about, what we really don't. So let's start with the quarterbacks. Geno Smith, Sam Howell, PJ Walker, a late signing.
Camp buddy
in the last month. Yeah, he's got a little bit of experience. Maybe he's one of those upper tier camp bodies in the league as far as third quarterback. It might be nice to keep a guy like that around the practice squad if you can. But I do feel like they believe that they feel good about Sam Howell.
Yeah.
And of course, we all know what we have in Geno Smith. We're hoping we get the best out of Geno Smith, I think, in this new scheme with Ryan Grubb, where he has an opportunity to increase some efficiency, especially on third down. I think that was a huge question mark last year. For me, it's still a question mark. It's like, how is Ryan Grubb going to make the third down efficiencies and the red zone efficiencies better with this offense with essentially the same personnel coming back?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar personnel coming back. I think that it's different in where the team was weakest, which was the interior of the offensive line and really just the offensive line in general. Because getting hopefully a full season of Charles Cross and not, 2/3 of one were part of it. He was playing hurt. And hopefully getting a full season of Abraham Lucas instead of a half a season where he's playing hurt the entire time. So, the hope is that slightly better blocking leads to much bigger results, in part because just better scheme.
So I was having a conversation with my dad. I'm up here in the Northwest visiting my folks primarily. And we had a conversation this morning about this same kind of subject, the efficiency on third down, the efficiency in the red zone, and trying to tie that back into maybe the defense. How the defense performs creates additional opportunities for the offense to have the ball. And we were both left with the same question. Well, does that at all make the offense any better? Do we score more points? I mean, the end result, do we score more points? And we both said, yes, but it doesn't necessarily translate to making the offense more efficient or better. It just gives the offense more opportunities to score with the same efficiency that they had last year. by scoring more points. That's kind of the result. That was like the worst case scenario that we thought we would end up with. And I, at the end we were like, we got to 9 wins with kind of a bad offense and a bad defense. If we can turn the dials a little bit and get a little bit more efficiency out of the third down, run better. I think the conclusion we came to was we need to run the ball better, more effectively, so that we're not in third and longs as much as we were last year, so that there are easier conversion opportunities and more opportunities, because if you're converting more third downs, you're getting more opportunities, you're extending drives, you're scoring more points. And if the defense can be more efficient, get off the field, they had a horrible time last year, as we know, generate turnovers, etc. I think the offense ends up being better just by virtue of the scheme and, turning those two dials. What do you think? How do you think Gino is going to fit with Ryan Grubb?
Well, I don't know. In that you look at what Washington did last year. Now they had Penix and Adunze, and they had an incredible amount of talent compared to the defenses that they were playing. There's an incredible amount of talent on Seattle's roster, but the defenses are way better. And so is that a fair comparison? Because Gino needs to get the ball out of his hands really quickly.
Yeah, that was definitely a key.
And he didn't.
Right.
And when he takes his shots downfield, they better be accurate. Now, that's something I think we can agree he can do, because he throws a really nice deep ball.
As long as the offensive line is giving him the protections and he's not having to dance around too much, which tends to lead to where Gino struggles a little bit with bad decision making, especially under pressure, a lot of pressure. So if he's under a lot of pressure, he feels like he's in a situation where he's behind a little bit in a game and he's trying to generate offense by himself. That's where Gino gets in trouble. Mm-hmm. And so if we can avoid those situations, I think that's this offense can really get kind of fine-tuned. How do you see them coming out of the gate, like starting the season?
Actually, I wouldn't be surprised to see them start fairly hot, simply because teams aren't going to know what to prepare for. And so they're going to be able to surprise teams. They're going to be able to kind of do what they want. I think so. The first couple of games, you're going to see this offense do pretty well. I mean, it's not going to be like, scoring records or anything, but I think they're going to be more efficient and score more than most people are considering. And then the defenses will adjust and the offense will drop off, and it'll take time for them to reestablish what they are, who they are. And somewhere mid-season, 10 games in, things will get rolling the way they should.
I see that as realistic, but also I could see it kind of a transition. They start hot. Nobody knows what to expect, but also they get better. The offensive line has more continuity. They're playing more snaps together. They're able to reach second level blocks better. They gain more confidence. Maybe the running game gets going. One aspect of the offense really needs to work right away. It's either going to be the intermediate passing game or the long game. Something's got to hit. And then you have to add that running game in. That has to be efficient right away. And I was talking to my dad again about the running back situation, and we were talking about Charbonnet, and he felt like Zach deserved more opportunities to run the ball and really kind of show what he could do. And my counter was, well, I agree with you in the long run, but in the short run, Ken Walker really kind of creates opportunities, creates his own running lanes, is able to bounce out when there's nothing, when things close off in the middle. Zach kind of needs a runway. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the speed that Ken has.
Nobody does.
And so those holes close up pretty rapidly if your offensive line isn't geared towards a run blocking offensive line. I think we all agree that while Bradford, for example, is considered to be a road grader kind of a player, that is yet to be completely proven out on the field. and they struggled as an entire unit last year in run blocking, and consequently, it was a struggle to move the ball and convert on third down, third and shorts, in the red zone and so forth. So I think Zach is going to get his opportunities this year. Also, a new feature, since we are talking about running backs now, and we can talk about Sam Howell for a minute too, but is how is Ryan Grubb going to integrate catching the ball out of the backfield with this group? And I think that's really, they did quite well last year. I think they had a combined almost 80 receptions between both backs, but I could definitely see that going up another 20% this year and getting to 100 receptions. What do you think?
I think they could do that. It kind of just depends on what defenses do, what they see and what they want to stop. If they want to stop the running game and the short passing game, then I could see them getting about the same. If they are worried about DK Metcalf and the deep throwing game, then you're going to see a lot more stuff to the backs. And so it kind of comes down to what defenses give them. And we don't know what defensive coordinators are going to feel is the most important thing to take away from Seattle.
So tell me how you feel about Sam Howell.
I think it was worth what very little they gave up to have a guy who has experience, even if it's 1 year as a starter, and where he led the NFL in interceptions. But there is a lot of learning that has already been done. He's still younger than most of the quarterbacks in this draft class. And he's already done a bunch of learning. And if they can calm down the jitters a little bit, so he's making calmer decisions, there's a lot to work with.
It's almost sounds like you're talking about Geno Smith.
Yeah, but
I mean, if we can have an offensive line that gives him the time, so the jitters aren't there,
34,
he won't make bad decisions. That's true. That is true.
And so I feel like you can expect growth from a 23-year-old who's only played a handful of NFL games. I think expecting growth from a 34-year-old is asking for something you're not going to get.
I mean, that's the rub, isn't it? It's like if there's question marks about this position, it's not in the short term. I think we all agree that Geno Smith is a bridge quarterback, and it's kind of an ideal fit for this season. You got a new coach, new regime, a seasoned veteran guy that's steady at the hand of the ship, and really, it's kind of an ideal situation. The question becomes, what do we do after 2024? And it is kind of nice to have a guy like Sam Howell on the roster. We all saw what Drew Lock did. There looked like there might be a window of opportunity there where he played last year. He got that win against Philly. But he decided to move on for maybe a better opportunity, and Seattle moved on quickly, pivoted, got Sam Howell. I like it. I agree with you. I think that the price was right. And we've got a couple years to figure it out.
That's the key. Yeah, they've got a couple years to figure it out. They still have 2 years of team control. So if he sits most of this year while Geno plays, and they can get to see what they've got in him. Do they roll into the following year with Howell as a starter competing against a rookie, or do they see and they're like, okay, we're going to bring Smith back and Howell back, and we'll kind of kick that can down the road again. But then the following year, you don't have a choice because both guys will be becoming free agents. And so you kind of have to do it. But that's on Sam Howell. He's got to come in and perform.
Okay. So what if, last question regarding quarterbacks, what if Sam Howell lights it up in training camp, really kind of shows that he's ahead of Geno Smith on picking up the offense, on the kind of offense they run? He seems to be a really good fit. He doesn't make mistakes. He throws for 4 or 5 touchdowns in the preseason, no interceptions. Geno struggles a little bit. Is there any way that Sam Howell can play himself into the starting lineup?
Absolutely. If he does that, it's his job.
You make that call that quick?
Yeah.
I mean, they've committed to Geno. They said there was no competition.
You're right. There's no competition until there's a competition. They also said that Geno Smith is the starting quarterback until he isn't. Like that, those were the actual words.
And you think 3 meaningless preseason games could dictate terms on that?
If Geno struggles and Sam Howell lights it up, Then in the third preseason game, Sam Howell gets the start. It's what starters against starters, and we see where he's at. They very well could. I mean, why wouldn't you go with the younger, cheaper player if he's playing better?
Because I think they do want to win this year. And I think Geno really does kind of give them the best chance to do that, all things being equal, and the complementary roster around Geno.
All things being equal, I would agree with you, but you didn't say all things being equal. You said Geno struggled to pick up the offense and do stuff, and Hal was lighting it up.
Well, and presumably,
if that's the case, Hal gives them the better chance to win.
But okay. I mean, there's a lot of factors that we're not talking about here, but presumably Geno does that with starters against starters. Sam's probably doing that against second, third string guys. Second half of these preseason games, at least initially, maybe he does get the opportunity to start. Maybe they do want to see him ones against one, and maybe he lights that up, and then they've got a real kind of question mark, a real quarterback controversy, which we haven't seen in this city for ages. And I don't know how they settled that. I don't know that 3 games in a preseason is enough to hand the keys to Sam Howell after Geno goes through the entire offseason with this new coaching staff, goes through and they see the work ethic, they see all the other intangibles. I think it's a little further apart than that, than maybe you're indicating.
It's not just 3 preseason games, though. It's every day of camp. It's every day of practice. And if there's a distinct difference and Hal's the better player, you play the better player.
No, that I agree with. If you take all of the things into consideration and you weigh all the things, not just the performances on the field in preseason, but all the things.
Yeah, because it's not just those 3 games.
Okay, so let's talk about running backs. So we talked a little bit about receiving out of the backfield. Let's talk about what Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet can do. And then let's talk about Kenny McIntosh and maybe a couple of the other guys that have a shot at the back end of that roster.
Yeah, so I would look at Walker and Charbonnet are different guys. Charbonnet is going to be between the tackles. He's going to pound it. He's going to run people over. He's going to make contact and punish people. Ken Walker can do that. He's big enough, and sometimes he will, but he's also a guy to bounce things and try and take it to the house because he's got breakaway speed. And I think that they do different things. They excel in different ways. And it's not a matter of which one's better. It's a matter of which one fits what you want to do better. And from what I've seen, what they're doing with the outside zone running game rather than the inside zone, honestly, Ken Walker's a better fit. His ability to take that cutback, get through a hole, and get downfield in a hurry, you're going to see you can get a lot of yards that way. Whereas Charbonnet's going to make that cut, he's going to make contact with someone in the hole, drive past them for 4 or 5 yards, as he goes through them, but he's not taking it to the house, and Walker can.
Well, he certainly needs more ramp up time, more time in the backfield to have lanes develop in front of him. He needs to show more patience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Ken has the ability to kind of create and make something out of nothing. I think Zach needs a little help to be able to be as effective because those lanes need to be a little bit more open. He needs a little bit more time to get to them. And once he breaks through, I do think that he has enough second gear to get at least to the third level of the defense. Maybe he makes one guy miss. And I don't think you're going to see the proliferation of Zach, having 100, 120 yard games with some 40-yard scampers in there mixed in. That's not really his thing, but those 11, 12, 13 yard pickups that we saw last year out of Zach when he was really successful, I think we can anticipate seeing a few more of those this year.
Part of it is we look at the offensive line and it's where does the offensive line fail in the running game? Because it did nothing but fail in the running game last year.
Do you want to tie that in now and talk about the offensive line? We can come back to the wide receivers and tight ends.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because with the way that the offensive line failed last year, there were times when Charbonnet should have been the running back because they could get him to the line of scrimmage, but they couldn't give him a hole past it. And you needed a guy that could get up to the line of scrimmage, make contact and not go down and have that balance through contact and power in order to make a positive gain. if they're failing and there's guys in the backfield, like they're a yard deep or 2 yards deep, I want Walker with the ball because his ability to turn nothing into something and bounce it and take it in a direction that's not where the play is designed, but simply where the play ends up having to go for it not to be a complete stuff. He can get there. And so where does the blocking fail? This isn't a matter of, hey, if the blocking is successful and you have a lane, because if you have a running lane, anybody can run through it. And
Yes, of course.
And so in that case, if they have good run blocking, both guys are going to be successful. Both guys are going to have more than 5 yards per carry. But what we've seen from Seattle since Pete Carroll got here, is that the run blocking isn't always that good. And it's where does it fail and what type of back gives you the most chance of success when it fails.
So let's talk about the interior of the offensive line, where if you're going to run up the gut, those are the guys you're going to run behind. How much confidence do you have in Laken Tomlinson, in Oluwatimi, in Bradford or Haynes to be able to open up holes, out physical the opponent, especially in the NFC West?
I don't have any confidence in their ability to do that.
So let's talk about really our first hole, our first concern
Yeah.
in this show is the offensive line, and probably the biggest fail that we're going to talk about today in this show.
Yeah. So, okay, do you look at across the offensive line? I like Charles Cross. I think I like him more than most do. There is a lot to work with. He's toolsy. He's been successful. He's had to play through some injuries that have hurt his ability to dominate.
I would argue that he's a little bit more finesse than I would like to see.
Okay.
But I was having a conversation this morning. If I will accept a middle of the road, league average talent at left tackle, as long as as long as the offense has the ability to have the full playbook and we're able to execute.
See, I think that saying he's league average is underselling him.
Tell me how he's better than league average.
Pass blocking. You're right, he's finesse, but he's been a good pass blocker. He's had games, especially his first 2 games back after injury this last year, where he struggled. He also couldn't push off that ankle. You could watch. He shouldn't have been out there yet, but they were so bad on the offensive line, they rushed him.
And they didn't make any excuses. And he didn't make any excuses. I mean, I got to give him credit. He kind of stepped up and he played while he was injured. Both guys did. Abe Lucas did as well.
Yeah, and as he got healthier, as the season went on, Cross got better. And you're right, he's not a mauler. That's not who he is. He is more finesse, but that's what you want more in your left tackle, because that's where your pass blocking is extreme. He gets less help from tight ends and running backs at left side than on the right side. And, he's protecting the blind side. So the quarterback has less ability to see what's coming when he does get beat. So you're better off having a finesse guy at left tackle than at right tackle. And you're better off having a mauler, just an absolute physical guy at right tackle.
And Abe Lucas kind of turned out that way.
He did.
When healthy.
So his rookie year, he was definitely that way. Last year, he was definitely not, but we know how bad that team was.
So talk to me about how Huff, the offensive line coach, is going to approach these guys. They've already stated out loud more than a couple of times that they want to be a physical team. It starts on the defense, Mike McDonald's, but he's also the head coach. And Ryan Grubb came out and said, hey, we want to be a physical offense too. That's our identity. It starts up front with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And if the first guy we're talking about, Charles Cross, we're saying he's finesse, does he ideally fit into what they're looking for out of their tackles?
So the thing is, when you're talking about being physical and that kind of stuff with an offensive line, some of it's scheme. If you're asking, guys to just take the one guy in front of them and push them back, then you should be playing Anthony Bradford. Because he can do that. But they want to run outside zone. Outside zone means you're getting people to move laterally. You need to get them you don't push them back, you push them to the side. And if they get in front of you, you wash them out of the play. And if they get behind you, you turn and seal. And it's all about creating holes laterally. You can do that without being, the biggest, most physical guy, but it becomes a physical play style in that you're still running the ball with power backs.
I guess I just
up to the linebackers and punishing people.
I watched I don't like Dallas very much, but I watched a Jimmy Johnson special on the Dallas Cowboys on the NFL Network yesterday, and they were old school. Charles Haley, Kevin Gogan. He was nasty. He was a University of Washington guy, but he ended up being a nasty kind of a guy in the middle of the defense. And I watched these guys, and every time they made a connection, they were driving guys back 5 yards off the ball. And no wonder Emmitt Smith could run pretty much untouched and had a 15-year career without any injuries because, that offensive line, right?
Yeah.
So wouldn't it be kind of cool to have one of those?
Yeah. Find me one in the modern NFL.
Well, and Bradford, like you have an entire line made up of guys that are like oversized, really strong, and you have a commitment, and it's an attitude. Like that Dallas team, they had an attitude. Like there was nobody that was going to out physical them. And we had that early in like 2011, 2012, 13. We had an offensive line that was a little bit more physical than it is today, for sure.
Yeah, but it still wasn't good.
That offensive line was pretty decent.
It was good in the playoff running because Okun got healthy and they, made it work. But for the most of that season, that offensive line was not very good.
So talk to me about George Fant, Stone Forsythe, and your confidence in that second tier.
Fant gives me more confidence than I had last year because he can come in and actually play and be adequate. Forsythe was never adequate, which was unfortunate because he had a lot of opportunity. And he's got some physical skills to do it, but he just never put it together. And at some point you can't just keep waiting for these guys to develop. And so going out and signing Fant, especially with Lucas's knee and the uncertainty there, he did have surgery. He's supposed to be healthy for the start of the season and all of that, but there's uncertainty there. They needed a backup. They needed a plan B, and Fant can come in and be adequate. He's not going to be great. That's not who he is.
Well, we're just talking about league average here.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
For a primary swing tackle.
For a swing tackle, if he can be, not even league average, slightly below league average.
That's pretty good.
As a swing tackle, that's pretty good.
So we've got a few other players. We also drafted a guy. Don't have any expectations this year that he sees the field or even makes the roster. And Michael Jarrell.
Yeah.
But
we have no idea.
So let's talk about the other interior spots at guard and center.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling about our new draft pick, the early competition that we saw in mini camps where McClendon Curtis got the nod at and all the starter reps at right guard as opposed to Haynes?
That's common. That has nothing to do with where they're going to end up or really where the team views them. It just has to do with the fact that Curtis has had the playbook since Grubb got hired, and Haynes had just gotten it, a couple weeks before. And so you want to be able to run these things and not be having guys just completely lost. It's not just about teaching that player, it's teaching the other 10 as far as making sure that they're doing stuff. So you always see the rookies with the second and third team, even if they end up as starters for week one. So I don't pay much attention to that.
What are your expectations out of this group? Laken Tomlinson's on the other side. He's definitely going to start the season.
God, that's hard. Laken Tomlinson used to be good, but you go look at he has not been good for a couple of years. The last 2 years, he's both been at best kind of mediocre.
Are we putting too much on him, expecting that competency level to come up with this new scheme?
I think so, because he doesn't really fit a zone scheme. He's more of a power inline guy. I think when they went out and they're like, okay, we're going to go get a vet because Cross is young. Oluwatimi's going to be a first-time starter. Haynes is a rookie. Lucas is, young and maybe hurt, so maybe it's going to be Fant. We need a stabilizing presence. We need a guy in the meeting room, in the film room, who can be the leader, and that's what they went and got in Laken Tomlinson. And I don't disagree that they
and George Fant.
Yeah, I don't disagree that they needed that, because I think they did. But to expect Tomlinson to be that guy and good, I think is asking a lot for a guy that's on the downside of his career.
Okay. How about Oluwatimi? It seems like they're just confident enough in watching the film and the tape from 2023 that they're going to hand the keys to the car to him. Are you good with that?
I guess. Do I have a choice?
Nick Harris is the backup.
You're
not going to pay anybody to be a backup center in this league.
Nick Harris is a journeyman backup. This isn't like this is a guy they drafted late in the draft but he has potential to grow into something. This guy's been a backup in the league for a few years. He signed him for nothing because that's what his market was. If you're expecting him to come in and start and play, you're asking for too much. Oluwatimi is an unknown. I like Oluwatimi. I think he can be really good. I think he can be especially good in an outside zone scheme, because that's where his talents lie.
I truly expect him to kind of grow into this. I think he's going to start as an average guy, but I think over time he develops, and this is his line.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's the center point. He's the guy that's going to make the line calls. It's eventually going to be his baby, and I think that he's capable. I think he showed that in college.
Oh, absolutely. He showed it in college, and he showed it when he got on the field last year. They just didn't give him a lot of opportunities. One of the things, I look at him and I go, what do we expect from him? Because if you're expecting him to grow up into a Jason Kelce type, I think you're asking for something he's not. But if you were expecting him to grow up into Robbie Tobeck, who is a little undersized and not the most physical player, but damn smart and very technical, I think that is a realistic expectation for Oluwatimi in a couple of years.
So let's go back out to the tight ends and wide receivers. Let's talk tight ends first. Noah Fant got the big money in free agency. They retained him. I think that's a good move. Overall, it's not that much money. I think 22 million spread over a couple of seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Farrell Brown they brought in primarily to block. He'll give you a little bit in the receiving game now and again. He's mostly a decoy guy. And then Brady Russell, Tyler Mabry been on the roster and around the roster for a little bit on the practice squad. They drafted A.J. Barner and Jack Westover from the University of Washington's a walk-on. So talk to me about the group. How do you feel? What do you think the usage is going to be like this year, given how loaded the wide receiver room is?
Well, see, that's part of it. You're going to see 3 wide receiver sets on every play. Last year, there were times when the Seahawks would go 3 tight ends because they had 3 good tight ends. You're not going to see that this year because there's no need to. Your wide receiver room is better than your tight end room. But I think what you're going to get is more George Fant incorporated in what they do. Because you're not trying to be tricky and get, have one of the 3 tight ends go out and, in routes or whatever. I think he's going to be a receiving threat. He's going to be viewed as that. He's on the field to be that, and that's who he is. So it's going to be him and 3 wide receivers. And if they take him off the field, right? Are you bringing on the 4th wide receiver? Are you,
right?
Bringing?
That's where I think Jake Bobo's got a role.
Or do you have another running back so that way you can have one come out of the backfield and one stay in to block and what do they do with that? But I think you're going to see Noah Fant all the time. And when they do go to 2 tight ends, if it's not AJ Barner, I'm going to be surprised. I know they signed Farrell Brown and he's the backup right now, whatever, but Barner has that potential. He's an athlete and he is a very good blocker. So you can trust him in doing those kind of things. And because he's an athlete, there is growth potential in the passing game for him to, become better in that zone. Whereas Farrell Brown is what he is.
So what are the chances of Jack Westover making this roster right out of training camp?
If everyone's healthy, none.
Even though he's got experience with the offensive line coach when it came to blocking there. He's got definitely experience in that offense, catching the ball, being a release valve. And Grubb knows him better than anybody.
Yeah, but he's not a great NFL. He's not a good NFL athlete.
That's true.
I mean, he's
but neither is Jake Bobo.
I would disagree with that. Jake Bobo may not have the speed, but he's got the other athletic traits. He's got the agility. He's got the vert. He's got the length. He's got things that work for him. Westover is a guy that, yeah, he knows the blocking scheme, but he's not a great blocker. And yeah, he knows how to be a relief valve, but he doesn't really run great routes at the NFL level. Yeah, if a guy gets hurt and they need a guy that they can depend on, that knows what the expectations are, and that can be, a body, then yeah, he can make the roster. But I think he ends up in the practice squad.
I do too. Okay, wide receiver. It's loaded.
I
mean, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Jigba, those guys are it's solidified. And then you've got Laviska Shenault, who's a potential threat in the return game, can give you a little bit in the passing game as well. I think he's underrated there myself. I like his physicality, and he gives you a little bit there. Jake Bobo, I think, has increased role this year as kind of that second receiving tight end kind of thing. More red zone usage, that sort of thing. Derek Young still is kind of unproven. Dwayne Eskridge is going to get a shot. We'll see if he can make it out of the first day of training camp, let alone training camp. And then you've got a bunch of other guys. Talk to me about the group. How you feel? Is there any holes? Is this the best unit on the team?
It's hard to say no, except for cornerback. It just is also really good. It is a great group. I mean, you have the top 3 spots. You have other guys that bring unique qualities to the table, like Bobo with his size, his height, his physicality. Shenault with his run after the catch ability and his balance and ability to run with power and things like that, which is why he's such a good returner. You can get him the ball in space. Good things will happen. And then there's a bunch of unknown, but it's not unknown without talent, right? Derek Young has incredible speed and size. That's a great combination. Can he be healthy? He wasn't healthy last year. He was a guy that they appeared to have packages built for, where he was going to be an H-back and he was going to be the team's fullback at times. And that's what they thought of him last year. And then he got hurt and never played. So, there's clearly talent there. A guy like Aesop Winston Jr. is a slot receiver who is never going to overpower anyone or, light up a highlight reel, but he's capable of getting open quickly on the inside and making that 5-yard catch to move the chains and do it consistently. That's why he's a punt returner, because of his ability to consistently get the ball and make one person miss and hopefully get upfield from it. Like they trust him to do those kind of things. So there's things to work with, even if they're not stars.
So let's go to the other side of the ball. So we're about 40 minutes into this thing. Might as well just keep going, eh?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So defensive tackle, we made some adjustments this year, brought in some new talent. We needed to.
Yeah.
Last year we struggled mightily defending the run. We've talked about this endlessly, whether it was personnel, whether it was scheme, incompetence. Obviously, the coaches couldn't get the most out of players, and things were just not good. This year they kind of revamped the thing a little bit. Jerron Reed comes back. Cameron Young is in his second year, maybe earns an additional opportunity to kind of get out there and be part of the rotation, although he needs to earn that.
Well, yeah, they brought in Hankins to be that nose tackle, that big 2-down against the run, a space eater.
That's one of my favorite signings. It just is, only because I've been basically pleading for this style of player and this size of player for so long, and they finally have it. I wish he was a younger version of himself.
Yeah, a better version of himself.
But nonetheless, maybe he plays well enough to show the team they actually really need to invest
Well, they
in a
did.
future body like his.
I mean, the fact that they signed him and they signed Matt Guttell to be his backup, who's another body like that. And they're not just giving it to Cameron Young and saying, go for it. Like, he's a little undersized. You have to go earn it. You have to go prove that you belong. And they're also not just giving it back to Jerron Reed, who's way undersized for that nose tackle position. I think this coaching staff understands that you've got to have that body.
Absolutely. There's no question.
Whereas the old coaching staff didn't.
So talk to me about how you feel about the group as a whole. And do you believe that you're okay going into the season with this group, or are there holes here that you feel need to be addressed?
I'm fine with for the nose tackle. The fact that you've got Hankins, you got 4 guys for 1 spot, right? Reed's a specialist. He'll be your guy on 3rd down. Hankins, or Young or Gotel, whichever one of them is healthiest and playing the best at the moment, gives you the 1st and 2nd down. Against the run kind of snaps. I think you're in good shape.
And then you have a bunch of guys that can play 2 or 3 or 4 positions.
Yeah.
I mean, even, Leonard Williams was talking about that. They're having those guys line up in 4 or 5, 6 different spots, sliding back and forth, inside, outside. Obviously, Byron Murphy comes to mind, a guy that's 308 pounds, played a little nose tackle in college. He's going to probably be asked to play a certain percentage of his snaps.
Well, especially
on the interior.
In obvious passing situations, 2nd and long, 3rd and long, later in games, when the team's going to throw the ball, that's when you don't need Hankins and that, 340-pound body in there. That's when you need guys that can penetrate and get upfield. So that's when you're going to see, whether it be Leonard Williams or Byron Murphy slide inside and take those snaps, or, that's Jerron Reed's given spot on the rotation. Right now is that he's going to be that 3rd down pass rusher on the inside. So there's lots of guys that can do it. I think they're fine. There's not really room in the roster for all four of those guys. So
that's true to a certain extent, except for guys like Jerron Reed can move around.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the other guys on the interior of the defensive line. We're lined up kind of as a 3-4 multiple hybrid kind of a deal. So we've got Jones, Leonard Williams, Miles Adams, Mike Morris, a couple other guys that can kind of transition, move inside, outside. It seems like a good group to me. It seems like a group that should be able to stop the run, should have an effect on getting to the passer, creating pressures and so forth. Last year we had over 40 sacks. What do you expect out of this group this year under Mike McDonald?
Well, I think you're going to see a massive improvement against the run.
Why?
Well,
why?
I was going to say getting the 40 sacks was great, but not being able to stop the run hurt more. It's because teams just ran right at him and they ran right by him, because I think you go and you look, people weren't sticking to their lanes. They weren't, managing their gaps like they're supposed to. They were just trying to get upfield on every play, and the running backs were running right by them. You're not going to see that and them get away with that with this coaching staff. You're going to see guys have to be more disciplined, or they're going to be sitting on the sideline. There's too much talent here, right? If Dre Jones doesn't want to do his job and maintain a gap, then he just won't play, and we'll see more of, Byron Murphy or Jerron Reed will slide over, or whoever it is. Like, they're going to be able to make those moves because they've got the bodies to do it.
Yeah. I think the talent investment across the board on the defensive line in the trenches was definitely warranted. The move away from spending money on linebackers and safeties really kind of just went directly to Leonard Williams and Dre Jones in the last 2 years. And then you've got the draft picks and a nice value signing in Jerron Reed, and you've got Hankins. And to me, that's a pretty decent defensive line in 2024. Now, I don't know what it's going to look like a couple of years from now, where Jerron Reed and Dre Jones are probably not around. But we'll have to see how they continue to develop talent there.
Well, yeah, and you've got 2 drafts between now and then. So you have a chance for, if Byron Murphy is what you and I think he is, and he is an absolute dominant player at the 3 and 5 tech, defensive end spots, then
all you have to do is add complementary players around him.
yeah. So, if Leonard Williams has aged and has become more of a rotational piece, okay. If Reed and Jones are gone, who did you replace them with, right?
Does Mike Morris develop?
Yeah. Does Cameron Young develop?
So let's talk about the edge guys, outside linebackers, edge group. It starts with Nwasu, but boy, Mafe is the player that you really want to pay attention to this year, because it seems like he's going to get set up to have a monster season.
He had a monster season last year. I mean, it may not show up like statistically a monster season in tackles or whatever, but he was one of those guys that when you watch the tape, you see him. You see him making plays. You see him doing disruptive things, being in the backfield and changing running plays and those kind of things. He had a good year when no one else around him did. And so having Nwasu, who is absolutely disruptive and healthy, because if he's going to get hurt, at least he got hurt early in the year, so he can be healthy for this year. Having those two guys together, that's going to be rough on opposing offensive coordinators.
And then you rotate in Hall and Darrell Taylor,
who hopefully both of which do better.
And
with
you
new coaching.
You combine all of these guys: the Jaron Reed, Jonathan Hankins, Byron Murphy, Jones, Williams, Mike Morris, Adams, Nwasu, Mafe, Hall, Taylor. That's a group.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like you feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. The front seven minus middle linebacker, you should feel really good about, because they're good and deep in all those spots. We haven't talked about middle linebacker, but that's where we're at now, which is one of the things we're talking about, holes. And if you're going to identify holes, I think you've got to identify this one.
So far, we've been okay. Like so far, we've identified the middle of the offensive line, and we really haven't talked about a lot of deficits or holes.
Because this
with
team
all the other
has
spots.
talent and it's got decent depth. It comes down to the interior of the offensive line.
Maybe that's why you're so optimistic this year.
Because I like the depth. Last year, if you remember when we were doing this, I was like, there was a reason why they signed a record number of undrafted free agents. There was 24? Like most of their training camp roster were rookies. That does not speak to depth. That speaks to terrible depth. And it showed last year. This year, depth isn't the problem it was.
Except at middle linebacker.
So
let's talk about it. So Dodson and Baker are the two bets that they signed. Baker's probably got the bigger resume, but he's also got the bigger injury history.
Yep.
Dodson's got the shorter resume, but played lights out last year when given the opportunity for the Bills. He goes out, tests free agency. He doesn't find the contract he's really looking for, but he gets a prove-it deal from the Seahawks on a 1-year deal, making about $4.5 million.
That deal is so much Uchenna Nwasu 2.0, right? Same type of guy that worked hard, bided his time, and then finally got a chance to play a little, exploded, but a small sample size, signed a prove-it deal with Seattle, and just took advantage of every second of it. Tyrell Dodson, same career arc. Now, does he do with it the opportunity what Uchenna Nwasu did and blow up?
Guy that comes in, starts on special teams, works his way into a rotation, gets an opportunity with an injury, comes in and plays, starts 10 games. Those 10 games are like primo. And then goes out and lands on the Seahawks. You're right. And we need him to show up.
We need him to show up big.
And why do we need him to show up?
Because what's behind those two? I mean,
nothing.
Baker, it's a big doubt on how ready he's going to be at the beginning of the season.
So Jerome Baker's had a knee. He's got a wrist.
He's had a shoulder.
He's not played yet. He signed for like $7.5 million on a 1-year fully guaranteed deal. They're expecting him to wear the green dot. even though he's going to probably play more of a kind of a weak side role. Same role that our draft pick Tyrese Knight is expected to kind of work into. Which we've talked about this a few different times, of how we think that there's potential that Tyrese Knight plays a lot early in this season for this team.
Because if Baker's not healthy, Tyrese Knight's the next guy up.
You've got John Radigan and O'Connell. I do like some upside there with O'Connell. We know kind of what we've got with Radigan. It's limited. He's a fill-in guy. Let's be honest. He's not going to be an NFL starter.
He's a special teams guy. He's a guy that does some things well. Is really good in the locker room. He's really good in the film room. That's why the coaches love him. But he's limited athletically compared to his peers. O'Connell is also limited athletically, just less so, and in different ways. And so neither of those guys are guys you want to see on the field in the middle of that defense.
They've also got Drake Thomas, which we like his upside, but he can't stay healthy.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And he might not even make it out of training camp. He might start on IR. We'll wait and see. So with all that said, there's a lot of unknowns, especially for Seahawks fans. We're used to having guys like Brooks, KJ Wright, Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, we're used to having
this has been the premier group for Seattle for such a long period of time. And now, honestly, you'd be pressed for most fans to even know these guys' names. What can we expect from this group? What is Mike McDonald and company looking for out of this group this season compared to previous seasons?
So this defense is not built in the same way that Pete Carroll's was in terms of what they want out of the middle linebackers. Pete Carroll's defense was about funneling every play to Bobby Wagner to get a tackle, or Jordan Brooks.
Yes,
and that's why the two of them
had over 150 tackles a season.
Yeah.
Year in, year out.
Year in, year out, because the defense is designed for those guys to get the tackles. This defense is not structured in the same way. And so you're not going to see those massive numbers by the middle linebackers. Instead, since they're not structuring in a way where you have to have that, they're like, okay, we don't need the guy that's going to get 140 tackles but can't cover. We need guys with speed that can, cover,
sideline to sideline.
Yeah. Just play super fast. And that's who Tyrell Dodson is, as he is.
Who are they expecting to have the most tackles in this defense? Is it more uniform? The strong safety is going to have a bunch. The middle linebacker is going to have a bunch. The weak side guy is going to have a bunch. And then the guys up front are just going to end up having more tackles because those guys are expected to make stops as opposed to just hold court and allow other players to come in.
I think if they were going to predict to the coaches which player is going to have the most, I think they'd say Tyrell Dodson.
Okay, so Tyrell Dodson has how many tackles at the end of the season? I'm just trying to compare to like
82.
a Bobby Wagner. So Bobby Wagner ends up having 140, almost double the production that you're expecting out of the leading tackle guy for the team.
Yeah, but how many tackles did Dre Jones have?
Maybe 40, if he was lucky.
24. And now he'll have 40, right? Jerron Reed, I think, had 18. And
so most guys on the defensive line are expected to have 35 to 40.
Yeah. They're rather than being expected to be in the 20s, they're going to be expected to be in the 30s.
Democratization of the defense, where the load is spread evenly amongst the front seven, including the middle. Okay. Let's talk about safety. We invested in safety this year while divesting in safety.
We divested in safety.
So talk to me about that.
So we had the two most overpaid safeties in the entire league. Two guys both making over $18 million a year and being bad for all the money. Adams will never be the player he was.
He's unsigned still.
Yeah. And
he's only 28.
Yeah.
And unsigned.
And a two-time All-Pro, at one point considered the best safety in the league. A guy that
for him, really.
Holds the NFL record for sacks as from a safety
It's
spot.
a hard mental adjustment to go from the premier superstar at your position. at LSU, the premier superstar at your position, your first 3 years in the NFL, a team's willing to give up 2 first-round draft picks for you, and you kind of have a pretty decent first season, although you were used kind of in a weird way, not traditional way. Maybe that was the best way to extend his career. But when it's used as mostly a strong safety and sometimes linebacker, his body couldn't take the punishment.
Yeah.
And
well, he
it's hard to adjust to that you literally washed out of the league.
Yeah.
In a quick 3 seasons with the Seahawks, you went from superstar to 0.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no adjustment period for that.
It's injury related. And he was already a unique player in that he was much more physical, much more of a linebacker than a safety in terms of he wanted to be up in the box, making plays, making tackles, hitting people, not a guy in the back covering. And so he was already kind of unique that way and didn't cover well for a safety. And then with the injuries, and now he can't run as well. He's not physical.
He's lost his heart.
Yeah.
His mojo.
He looked like a guy who was absolutely lost last year when he was playing.
And slow and behind everything and chasing instead of being proactive. Yeah.
And
Diggs was kind of the same way.
Yeah.
Diggs lost confidence in the defense.
Diggs just pissed me off.
Diggs pissed me off.
Because I don't know if
I think he infected other players.
It's not so much that he lost, maybe you can use those words. He gave up.
I think he lost confidence in the defense and then he gave up.
I think he just didn't care. He wanted the paycheck.
All of the above.
And so 2 years ago, he started awful for the first half of the season, and then things kind of came back to him, and he actually played really well down the stretch. And you're like, okay, well, whatever it was, he's got it fixed. And maybe he was nursing an injury. And then he just came out and looked like he just didn't care.
Making business decisions.
Yeah, constantly. Right. And I'm like, they're paying $36 million for these 2 guys who are not good players.
You didn't see that same attitude out of Witherspoon.
No.
Right? A rookie comes in, and even though the defense is bad, the entire defense is bad. I get that Diggs was frustrated. I get that. But he's also a pro. Excuse me. And Witherspoon comes in and really disassociates from the defense kind of as a whole and really kind of makes his own way.
He does his job and does it well.
Defense. Yeah.
So,
okay. So we get Jenkins in. Julian Love comes back. Thought he had a really pretty decent second half of the season.
Mm-hmm.
End up going to the Pro Bowl. And then Jerick Reed got injured. Didn't really see too much out of him. Not sure what we can expect there. Kobe Bryant, Kevon Wallace. What do you think?
Well, I like the Rashawn Jenkins signing. Again, it's kind of like the Jerome Baker signing, a guy that's had some injuries and, is expected to be a leader and one of the better players on the defense, but he's older and we'll see if he can hold up. But they went and got Kevon Wallace to kind of be that safety valve in case he can't. And Wallace was a kind of a nice budget signing as a third safety, kind of what Julian Love was a year ago. Guy that's going to get playing time, both because you need to keep Jenkins healthy and because they will want to go 3 safeties occasionally. When you've got your top 3, you're in pretty good shape at safety. I still like Jonathan Sutherland.
I do too.
I thought you look at him at camp and preseason, he looked like a guy that needed to be on the field. And then he got hurt and had a hard time coming back and all of that. But now he's going to be in here. It's a new coaching staff, new defense, all that. I still think he has tremendous potential.
He's probably the most physical safety in that group. Mm-hmm. And the team talks about being physical as an identity.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a shot.
And with his speed, he's going to probably make the roster just because of special teams.
So I'm not hearing you say we have any deficits or holes to worry about with this group.
It's not a hole. It's not a deficit. It's also not really deep, and it's not a strength. But it's appropriate for safety. I'm sorry. It has
been a strength in Mike McDonald defenses in the past. Do you expect this to grow into a strength either this season or next?
No, because I don't really see the players to. It was a strength because he had Kyle Hamilton, who's a special player, and so they took advantage of the special player and built some of what they did around him.
Do you expect them to get a special player?
No.
In the safety group in the next 2 years?
No, I think more importantly, they have a special player in Devin Witherspoon.
Okay, so let's talk about the corners.
Yeah.
Because you said earlier, if it wasn't for the corners, the wide receiver room would be the best position group. So you view this as the best position group on the team.
I do. And you were talking about special players. I see Devin Witherspoon as a special player. They're going to build some of what they do around his talents because he's got so many of them. He's a guy you can move and do all sorts of things all over the field. He's a good pass rusher. He's a freaking cornerback. But he can cover zone. He's physical. He plays the run well. He
gets up to the line of scrimmage and makes plays at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
He can have, he can lead the team in tackles for loss. I mean, he's one of those guys where.
So you're going to see him in different
as a
roles.
chess piece.
Yeah. You're going to see him covering the nickel. You're going to see him covering the outside. You're going to see him as a deep safety. You're going to see him moved around because you can, and you can take advantage of other people's talents because you know he can handle anything you throw at him.
He's really got an opportunity to have a monster season statistically.
Yeah.
Not just
I think
all the intangible stuff.
They build the secondary and all the weird and fun things that they do around Witherspoon the same way that he built them around Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore. So if he's a corner instead of a safety, it's the same ideas in terms of putting people in spots where the other team has no idea what to expect from them.
So if you want an idea of how they're going to use Witherspoon, go look at where Kyle Hamilton took all his snaps last year and how they moved him around.
They lined him up in the slot a lot more than at safety, but then he did safety things or he rushed the passer. But sometimes he covered in the slot. And
Devin Witherspoon spent a heck of a lot of time in the slot last year too.
Yeah. And so you start there and then you look at, Reek Woolen, who's such a unique talent with his size, speed combination, and his length. He's one of those guys that they keep talking about. The coaches keep talking about. They're pushing him there. Expect huge things from him.
What happened last year?
And he got hurt, lost some confidence. And then when you got that shoulder injury and didn't want to make tackles. And I think there was part of it that he was like, why am I throwing my injured shoulder in there?
That's where I think Quandre Diggs got a hold of him a little bit.
Yeah. Why am I throwing my injured shoulder in there to try and make this play when everyone else is just watching him run by? And I think that kind of what happened last year. And then he got benched.
It was an infection.
Then he got benched. And Mike Jackson, who's a name we haven't talked about yet, but should, came in and played really well in his spot. And the defense looked better. And then they're like, okay, but we're going to give Reek another shot because physically he's got more talents. Right, he's got more physical ability,
and he played well,
and he did after that.
So Mike Jackson and Trey Brown.
Mike Jackson is big. He's strong. He tackles well. He plays great at the line of scrimmage. He is a really good cover two corner where they're in charge of the short flat out there. You're not expecting them to go deep. Not as much of a man cover guy. He can also do the cover three thing, but he has to.
So even though he's a physical guy, he doesn't have the makeup speed to play cover.
Yeah,
cover.
But he's very physical, very long, does a lot of things well. He's a really good zone corner and underrated, absolutely underrated.
I agree. And he's on a cheap contract.
Yes, he is, which helps.
He's a highly tradable asset. And if I was going to be a guy that was going to speculate on which players on the roster have tradable asset material written all over them, he'd be a guy because we are so deep at the cornerback spot. Maybe we're not so deep at the guard or center spot or whatever. There could be an opportunity for this team to improve before training camp ends by moving one of their corners. It happens in the NFL. It's not like you want to speculate and talk about moving players or whatever. And I normally don't do that. But when you take a look at this group, there's a couple players, Jackson, even Woolen and Brown come to mind when I'm thinking about areas where if we shipped them out and we got the right return, we might not miss them so much.
It's such a deep group because we've talked about those three guys, and you mentioned Trey Brown, who was a high draft pick and came on as a rookie.
I haven't even mentioned the draft picks yet.
Yeah. Trey Brown came on as a rookie and played really well, and he's battled some injuries, and then has kind of been pushed down the depth chart because Reek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon have been added to the roster, but he keeps fighting to get onto the field, and is a good player and has a tremendous amount of trade value. But when you're this deep at corner, maybe he's a tradable asset. Artie Burns, veteran guy. I still can't believe he's still on the roster.
He agreed to come back on a roster that was fully loaded.
Yeah. And he played more last year. 2 years ago, he didn't play at all. Why did you stick around and re-sign? But then last year he did. They played him in the slot. They played him on the outside. He's very versatile. Played pretty damn well. I just wish they would have played him more. Because.
But now he finds himself in a similar situation that he did in 2022.
Yeah, find a way on the field.
So, and then you've got Boykin and Whitaker, a couple practice squad level guys. But then we drafted two corners in this draft from Auburn, Pritchett and James. And they both kind of have similar stature, but one plays a little faster than the other player, maybe has a better opportunity to kind of make the roster. I don't know that Pritchett's I see both players making the roster out of training camp unless there's movement
He's
on the roster.
A guy who's going to be better on the outside. DJ James isn't as fast, but he's got some pretty good short area quicks, and is probably better in the slot. DJ James reminds me too much of Kobe Bryant, a guy who was a good college corner, but lacks the physical oomph to translate it to the pros. I don't have that same concern about Pritchett.
Well, that's why he fell in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what are you going to do? I mean, they're not going to carry 7 corners.
Yeah. If you think you can get DJ James through to the practice squad, maybe that's how you do it. Or maybe
it could come down to Sutherland or Pritchett and James. I mean, really, you're talking about a situation where you've just got too many guys that are NFL level quality guys and not enough spots.
Yeah, that's why we keep mentioning a trade, because you're going to have to cut one of these guys. And that's Kobe Bryant. We have him listed as safety, but he's also a nickel player and a corner. So
you've got scheme diversity with him.
Yeah, even if he hasn't been good.
Trey Brown's scheme diverse.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson is not scheme diverse.
No.
Tariq Woolen is not scheme diverse.
Do you ever get the feeling that Michael Jackson might be a good, strong safety?
Yeah, we talked about that when Michael Jackson first emerged for this team like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, his size, his physicality, and he can cover. He's not a great man cover, but he's a very good zone cover. He could be a strong safety. And
I agree.
I mean, he might be old enough in his career. You don't want to have him make that change, but
so there's beyond having holes. There is no holes. We don't have enough spots.
We don't have enough spots. There aren't enough holes on the roster for all of these pieces to fit into. And that's why I said this is the strongest position group, because not only do you have elite players like Woolen and Witherspoon, but you've got tremendous depth. So much you're going to have to cut a good player
or trade.
Yeah.
So it'd be kind of cool to just swap a guy like Michael Jackson or Trey Brown for a starting level inside linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that seems like a fair deal. So really going through this exercise,
you do that, or an actually good guard to play left guard.
It's hard to make trades,
I know.
Player for player trades in the NFL. It happens, but it's hard. The better thing that you could do is trade for an asset, a future draft pick, and then make a second trade to acquire using that draft pick or something similar to acquire. So given what we've just talked about, it seems like we're setting ourselves up to have high expectations this year. And our prediction show, which comes around the first week of September, may be more optimistic than I think I thought that we would be at prior to the draft. And even after the draft, really, you almost have to marinate in this a little bit to kind of realize that we have a pretty decent roster. We have a few holes. We're not San Francisco. Not even close.
Mm-hmm. And San Francisco's roster isn't what it was last year.
But, San Francisco with its roster is only getting to 12 or 13 wins.
Yeah.
Seattle had 9 wins last year in a completely dysfunctional mess of a team.
Yeah.
It seems like it's semi-realistic to set the floor at 9 wins, but set the optimistic ceiling at 11 or maybe even 12, depending on how things go. And if you get a fast start, they can certainly have a fast finish.
Well, last year,
because if the offense starts clicking, the defense starts clicking.
They got to 9 wins last year because they had a fast start before teams figured out how bad they were, and then they fell apart. And I don't know if was an.
Well, they made it through the gauntlet, which was hard, yeah. and nobody was going to survive that, and they didn't.
Nope.
But
they had that was a bad team. 9 wins, sure, but offensively and defensively, they were statistically bad. They were much worse statistically than the record shows. At the same time, they weren't as talent deficient as statistically they looked because they were coached poorly.
Do you follow that,
especially on defense? I thought, like, you and I had this conversation a lot last year. You're like, oh, there's a talent gap. I'm like, I don't believe there is a talent gap with the defense. I think there is a coaching gap that is a mile wide.
And that was, I think, proven out. Pete Carroll lost his job.
Yeah.
Because of that, really, in essence. All right. How about the coaching staff? Do we have any kind of holes there, deficits? Certainly we have unknowns.
It's all
We're making some assumptions here that this coaching staff comes in and has immediate success. That's rare when you have a coaching change at the top, let alone the entire staff, both offensive and defensive, is brand new and unproven. Yet college coaches on the offensive side of the ball, on the defensive side, you got Leslie Frazier as kind of a token figurehead coach.
Oh, he's more than that.
And then you've got a defensive hire, a defensive coordinator in this league for just a few years, highly successful. But head coaching in the NFL is a thing, and it's a big thing. And you see much more, you're much more inclined to fail than you are to succeed in general, no matter how the expectations are set prior to you starting out. It's a tough league.
Well, there's a couple things. One is that the skill set required to be a coordinator and the skill set required to be a good head coach are not the same. There's actually not as much overlap as I think people want.
Most people who succeed at a defensive coordinator position, an offensive coordinator position in the NFL, get opportunities to be head coaches.
Yeah.
And of those, 1 or 2 out of 10 have further success.
Yeah.
And stick around.
Because there's just the skill set required to be good at one is different than the skill set required to be good at the other. And few people have both skill sets. And
so Mike McDonald wants to be the defensive coordinator and call plays as well as be the head coach. Can he succeed at one job and not succeed at the other?
Yes, it's possible for him to be successful as a defensive coordinator and not as a head coach, because if he allows for fractures to happen between the offense and defense, where they are not a team, they are 2 teams, then he will fail as a head coach, even if he does really well as a defensive coordinator. On the other hand, it's possible that he can succeed as a head coach and recognize that the job responsibility is too big for him to do both, and that he has to hand more of the defensive coordinator job off to Dirge because it's just too much. And that's possibly where I guess he'd be successful as a head coach and kind of failing as a defensive coordinator, even though that's where his skill set and talent and reputation and everything.
I'd almost rather have that, even though it might set us back a little bit on the defensive side. I think that's only momentarily.
Yeah.
I think long term, the head coach is harder to fill.
It is.
And
If you can guide
McDonald, that defensive mind is going to be kind of guiding that defense anyway, even if he's not calling plays on Sunday. I'd rather have that scenario.
Well, see, that's kind of what we had with Pete Carroll early on. It was his defense. He designed it. He had the things he needed a caretaker for it. And that's with Bradley and Quinn. Those were guys that could do that. And Quinn kind of added his own, but he added his own stuff to it that made it better.
Yes.
And then after that, they started to drift from it. He started being more hands off, whether it be Chris Richard or then with Ken Norton. Like Ken Norton needed Pete Carroll in his ear every day in order for him to be successful in that role. And I don't think he had it. And then once the Ken Norton left, he was completely hands off because it's a different scheme. You do your scheme. They had autonomy, and they had autonomy to be very bad because that coaching staff was, I'm sorry, Clint Hurd, I don't think you did a good job in any way, shape, or form. I think it was pretty damn pathetic. And
it was good recording with you in person.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So
we used to do this occasionally. But then you decided to move to Arizona.
Yeah, I did. Shame. So we have been lazy a little bit this summer. It's kind of felt good to kind of take a little break. We still have done a show every week, so we have that streak intact. This is our 580th show. That's a lot. That's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
That's a commitment. So we don't really have another show scheduled until next week. Do you know what next week is?
Right before training camp starts.
Yeah. We're into our training camp preview shows. So offense and defense.
Yeah.
We've got a guest appearance on the 24th, I believe.
I've got a trip completely off the grid. Off the grid. There's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Right after that show, I'm going to be in a place where it's an hour drive to the nearest cell tower.
Oh, you won't even be able to get training camp updates.
No, I'm not going to be even that sad about it.
How long are you going?
Like 4 days.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to be off the grid in September,
and
I'm going to have you carry the load for a couple weeks, like completely.
Yep.
I don't know.
We'll make it happen.
Timing on these trips, it's not my first choice. It's I'm going to miss the first 2 games out of the country.
Yeah.
But I might sneak in.
What a shame you get to go to Europe or wherever you're going this
time. Spain, France, and Italy.
Nice.
I will maybe, depending on the timing of the show, I may sneak in a way to call in to bug you guys if you're doing it by yourself or if you've got a guest.
I think I'm going to have a guest.
Yeah.
I'm still working on that, so I don't want to say it here and make the commitment for someone else before they've completely agreed to it. But I think I've got a guest.
Good. My dad would show up. Like 83 years old, knows his stuff, sharp as a tack.
The other person, if the person that I'm the professional I'm trying to get in, ends up not being able to do it. There's the person who I got matching Seahawk tattoos with.
Oh, nice.
I think she'd be fun to have on. So that might happen to you too.
Yeah. Reward the super fans.
Yeah. Why not?
Nice. I like it. All right. So until next time, next time we're doing the offense and defensive sides of the ball on a training camp preview. And then we'll be talking about real football after that, which is, I think, where we want to be.
Yes.
Because,
Yep.
It's been talking about speculation, projection.
It's hard.
Analyzing way too many players prior to the draft that we didn't pick. And then,
Yeah.
So it's fun, though. I mean, we've been doing this for a while. 8 years. This is our 8th season.
We did get Byron Murphy, though.
Yeah.
You and I both wanted Byron Murphy.
Yeah,
we both mocked him to Seattle so many times.
And we did.
So.
And Christian Haynes occasionally.
Yep.
I think I missed on everyone else. Maybe
Yeah,
Barner. Once in a while, I'd put Barner in there.
Yeah, Barner wasn't my pick, even when they made it at the same position. I thought there was a better player. But I've come to like it because he is.
Byron Murphy's going to be a difference maker.
He is.
He's going to be a player to watch, kind of a jersey guy. Like you buy a jersey of that guy. I might do that. I haven't purchased a jersey since Metcalf was a rookie, and so it might be time to pull out the wallet again.
Yeah, my last jersey was Largent.
Really? Yeah, but you've got tattoos.
Yeah.
See, I wear jerseys so that I can take them off.
No, but see, it was last year when
you bought
when
Largent
they did the throwbacks. I'm like, I'm going to get the throwback jersey, but I'm putting Largent on it. I'm getting an 80.
That makes sense. I like that.
So yeah.
All right, let's get out of here. You can find Keith on Twitter, Myers NFL. I'm NW Seahawk. Show Seahawks Playbook podcast. Find it on your favorite podcast platform and our own YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, share it, leave a comment, all of the above. And we'll see you next time.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.